Good morning. So welcome to Chemipedia, chemistry classes for 11th and 12th standard. So in this video, I'm going to discuss about this year NEET chemistry questions. Okay, so now question number 51. So look at the question. The right option for number of tetrahedral and octahedral voids. They're asking the tetrahedral void and octahedral void in a hexagonal primitive unit cell. Hexagonal primitive unit cell. What is the number of tetrahedral void as well as octahedral void? Correct. Now, so it is a hexagonal primitive unit cell. It is a hexagonal primitive unit cell. So you have to find out number of tetrahedral void and octahedral voids, isn't it? Right. So in a hexagonal packing unit cell or hexagonal primitive unit cell, the number of atoms per unit cell is about 6. So the formula for octahedral void is n. Formula for number of tetrahedral void is about 2n. Whereas here the n value, number of atoms per unit cell is about 6. N value is 6. But therefore the number of octahedral void also nothing but 6. Whereas number of tetrahedral void is about twice the time of n, isn't it? So that 2 into n, so 2 into 6, 12. But therefore the number of tetrahedral void is about 12. So together the number of tetrahedral and octahedral voids. Number of tetrahedral and octahedral voids. Tetrahedral voids is about 12. Octahedral voids is about 6. So 12 and 6. Option 4 is the right answer. Okay. Right. So next question number 2. Zirconium with atomic number 40 and hafnium with atomic number 72. They are having similar atomic and ionic radii. So because of which of the following reason? Belonging to same group, diagonal relationship, lanthanide contraction, having similar chemical properties. So actually this comes under the topic lanthanide contraction. So lanthanide contraction, we have the consequences of lanthanide contraction, isn't it? What is meant by lanthanide contraction? When we go across lanthanides, when we move from cerium to lutetium in lanthanide series, there is a gradual decrease in ionic and atomic radii, isn't it? So this is what we call it as lanthanide contraction. Because of lanthanide contraction, we are having the following consequences. The basicity of lanthanide decreases. Basicity of lanthanide 3+ ion gradually decreases. Then lanthanides are found to be similar in many properties. Their atomic radii and ionic radii is almost found to be similar. There is no much change in their radii. So they found to have similar properties. There's another consequence of lanthanide contraction. The third one, actually the original place of lanthanide is near the transition metals, isn't it? Transition elements. So that because of that place, this lanthanide contraction has some influence over transition elements. Okay, the second and third row transition elements are found to be similar in properties because of lanthanide contraction, whereas zirconium is coming under second row transition element, hafnium is coming under third row transition element. These two are having almost similar radius, almost nearly same radius. This is only because of the lanthanide contraction. Actually, when you move from zirconium to hafnium, going down the group, the radius, atomic radius is supposed to increase, isn't it? Whereas zirconium and hafnium, they have almost same radius. This is only because of lanthanide contraction. Okay, so that the answer for question number 52 is option 3, lanthanide contraction. Okay, right. So now let us go for the next question. Question number 53. For a reaction A gives B, the enthalpy of reaction is minus 4.2 kilojoules per mole and the enthalpy of activation is about 9.6 kilojoules per mole. So then which of the following potential energy diagram will be correct for the given data? Okay, so there you are given 4 potential energy diagrams. Right now, what is the reaction given there? Reactant A is giving product B and enthalpy of reaction is given as minus 4.2 kilojoules per mole, right? So now look at the enthalpy of reaction. So enthalpy of reaction is having negative sign, isn't it? So negative sign indicates that this reaction is exothermic in nature. This reaction is exothermic, which means when product B is formed from A, there is a liberation of heat takes place, isn't it? But therefore, the potential energy of product B is less compared with potential energy of reactant A. Reactant A has greater potential energy because of exothermic nature. When A becomes as B, the potential energy of B is decreasing. Okay, right. So for this condition, the exact potential energy diagram is option 2. Option 2. So look at this option 2. Here you can see that the position of A is little above, whereas position of B is little below A, isn't it? Which means that the potential energy of A is greater, potential energy of A is greater, potential energy of B is lesser, isn't it? So because of the exothermic nature, the potential energy of product is getting decreased. Probably this is the correct answer for question number 53. Okay, right. So now we go for the next question, question number 54. Tritium is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen. Tritium is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen and it undergoes spontaneous decay and emits rays, isn't it? Which of the following ray or particle is emitted? Which of the following particle is emitted when tritium undergoes radioactive decay? Okay, so this is the formula of tritium with formula H13. When it undergoes spontaneous decay, it forms He23, which is nothing but helium isotope. This is nothing but isotope of helium. Normal helium He24, this is He23 with mass number 3. So it is an isotope of helium. Along with that, a beta particle E-1 0. So that when tritium undergoes radioactive disintegration, it emits beta particle. Okay, so answer is option 1 beta. So this is the correct answer for question number 54. Okay, right. So beta particle, correct. Then question number 55. So deficiency of RBC, deficiency of red blood capsules cells or red blood cells is due to the deficiency of which of the following vitamin? RBC deficiency is deficiency disease caused by which of the following vitamins? So the answer is vitamin B12. Okay, so the right answer option A, vitamin B12 is the answer. Okay, right. The other options given are vitamin B1, B2 and B6, whereas vitamin B1 is giving a deficiency disease which is called as beriberi, isn't it? Which affects the peripheral nerve system, isn't it? Then vitamin B2, its deficiency disease is nothing but chalosis, which is nothing but formation of small cracks, inflammation in the mouth and lips, etc., isn't it? Then the other one, vitamin B6, the deficiency disease is nothing but convulsion, which is nothing but muscle contraction, involuntary muscle contraction. So that the RBC deficiency is due to the deficiency of vitamin B12. So option 1 is the right answer. Okay, right. So now we go for question number 56. So look at the question number 56. The molar conductance of sodium chloride, hydrogen chloride and sodium acetate at infinite dilutions are given there. For sodium chloride, it is about 126.45 Simon centimeter square per mole, and HCl it is for 426.16, and for sodium acetate it is about 91.0 with unit, common unit Simon centimeter square per mole. Okay, right. Now the question is, what is the molar conductivity of acetic acid? What is the molar conductivity of acetic acid at infinite dilution? Okay, they are asking to find out lambda naught of acetic acid. Lambda naught of acetic acid. That is what you have to find out. Okay, right. So now this question is solved based on a law what you called as Kohlrausch's law. What is it? Kohlrausch's law. Here acetic acid is a weak acid or weak acid, so it is a weak electrolyte. Whereas for strong electrolytes, the molar conductivity at infinite dilution is nothing but the summation of molar conductivity of cation and anion. But for weak electrolytes such as acetic acid, we cannot simply add the cationic and anionic conductance So there you are supposed to use a law which is called as Kohlrausch's law. Okay, so according to Kohlrausch's law, the lambda naught of acetic acid is equal to lambda naught of sodium acetate and plus lambda naught of HCl minus lambda naught of NaCl. Okay, so that the molar conductivity of a weak electrolyte can be calculated by appropriately adding the molar conductivities of strong electrolytes. Here acetic acid molar conductivity at infinite dilution is calculated with some strong electrolytes like sodium acetate, hydrogen chloride and sodium chloride. Okay, right. Now I have substituted the values here. So I am getting about 390.71 Simon centimeter square per mole. Okay, so that is the molar conductivity of acetic acid at infinite dilution. Okay, so now the answer is option 2 is the right answer. 390.71 Simon centimeter square per mole. Okay, I think you can follow the formula and the calculation. Okay, right. So now we can go for the next question. Question number 57. So correct structure of 2,6 dimethyl dec-4-ene. Correct structure of bond line structure of a compound 2,6 dimethyl dec-4-ene. Okay, right. So now for this option 1 is the right one. This is the correct option. Okay, so dec-4-ene. Decene is nothing but an alkene with 10 carbon atoms, starting with 1 till 10 alkene with 10 carbon atom. Dec-4-ene, which means double bond is at 4th carbon. Okay, right. Then this alkene has two substance, methyl substance. So that's why dimethyl. One at 2nd carbon, another one at 6th carbon. That's why 2,6 dimethyl dec-4-ene. So probably option A will be the correct answer. Okay, right. So I have clearly explained how the first one can be the correct structure for 2,6 dimethyl dec-4-ene. Okay, so here you have one methyl group at 2nd carbon, another methyl group at 6th carbon. So 2,6 dimethyl and totally 10 carbons are there, decene, and a double bond is near 4th carbon, next to 4th carbon. So dec-4-ene. Okay, right. Next question number 58. Question number 58. The maximum temperature that can be achieved in blast furnace. What is the maximum temperature which can be reached in a blast furnace? Okay, so this is a direct answer. So using blast furnace we can reach maximum temperature about 2200 Kelvin. Okay, so this comes in metallurgy lesson. So the maximum temperature which is reached in a blast furnace is about 2200 Kelvin. Okay, so option 2 is the right answer. Okay, right. So now question number 59. So identify the compound which will react with Hinsberg region to give a solid which dissolves in alkali. Okay, right. So first of all we should know what is exactly the Hinsberg region. Okay, so actually benzene sulfonyl chloride. What is it? Benzene sulfonyl chloride is called as Hinsberg region. Okay, sulfonyl chloride, this is nothing but sulfonyl chloride. Yes, double bond O, single bond Cl, another Cl, isn't it? If this one Cl is substituted by C6H5 group, then it is called as Hinsberg region. Benzene sulfonyl chloride. The chemical name of Hinsberg region is benzene sulfonyl chloride, whereas this Hinsberg region is used for distinguishing primary, secondary and tertiary amines. Primary, secondary and tertiary amines. Okay, right. Now the question is which will react with the Hinsberg region, give a solid which readily dissolves in alkali. Okay, so here the answer is option 3 is the right answer. So option 3, formula CH3, single bond CH2, single bond NH2, which is a primary amine whose name is ethanamine, CH3, CH2, NH2. Okay, right. Now when it reacts with Hinsberg region, the hydrogen of amino group reacts with Cl. HCl will be removed up so that you get an addition compound like this. Okay, benzene ring, yes, double bond O, single bond NH with ethyl group, isn't it? So this product is a solid organic compound. The product what you get here is a solid substance which readily reacts with alkali because due to presence of the amino hydrogen, this can readily reacts with alkali. So which means readily dissolves in alkali and forms a clear solution. Okay, so that is how option 3, that is ethanamine, is the answer for question number 59. Okay, right. Whereas in tertiary amine, there is no amino hydrogen, isn't it? Tertiary amine, because tertiary amine formula R3N, there is no hydrogen at all with nitrogen, so that this tertiary amine on the cannot react with this Hinsberg reagent. Okay, right. Secondary amine can react with Hinsberg reagent, but so after removal of hydrogen from amino group, so the product doesn't carry any hydrogen, so that does not react with alkali. So like primary amine, it doesn't give a clear liquid. So only primary amine, due to presence of amino hydrogen, so after reaction with benzene sulfonyl chloride, it readily dissolves in alkali and giving a clear liquid. Okay, so the answer is option 3, primary amine, ethanamine. Okay, whereas this is a nitro compound. Option 2 and option 4. Option 2 is a secondary amine, NH group. Then option 4 is a tertiary amine, which has N. But only primary amine is giving a solid organic compound with Hinsberg reagent followed by clear liquid when it reacts with alkali. Okay, right. So now let us go for question number 60. Okay, so question number 60 is based on colligative property. Okay, so we have 3 solutions. 10 gram of glucose in 250 ml water, whose osmotic pressure is about P1, and 10 gram of urea in the same volume of water, osmotic pressure with P2, and 10 gram of sucrose. 10 gram of sucrose with osmotic pressure P3. Okay, so you have glucose, urea, the third compound is nothing but sucrose with equal mass, 10 gram each. They have osmotic pressure about P1 for glucose, urea P2, and sucrose it is about P3. Okay, right. Now the question is, what is the right option for decreasing order of osmotic pressure? Now this P1, P2 and P3 are supposed to be arranged in a decreasing order. Okay, so decreasing order in the sense higher to lower value. Okay, right. So all these solutions are having same mass, isn't it? So 10 gram of each dissolved in same volume of water, 250 ml of water. Okay, right. Now this question can be solved based on osmotic pressure formula. So osmotic pressure formula pi equal to CRT, isn't it? Pi osmotic pressure, concentration, gas constant, temperature, isn't it? Right. This concentration is nothing but number of moles divided by volume of solution, N by V, isn't it? Whereas N is nothing but mass divided by molar mass. So ultimately you are getting osmotic pressure equal to the mass of substance small m divided by capital M, molar mass into numerator RT divided by V, isn't it? Right. Now just look at the relation between osmotic pressure and molar mass. Okay, so osmotic pressure and molar mass are inversely related. Osmotic pressure is inversely related with molar mass. Okay, by among these 3 substances, that is glucose, urea and sucrose, the one which is having lesser molar mass can have greater osmotic pressure and vice versa. Which one is having a lesser molar mass? It's nothing but urea. Whose osmotic pressure is P2. So lesser molar mass, so greater osmotic pressure. Urea is having greater osmotic pressure. P2 is comparatively greater. Okay, right. So decreasing order, so greater to lesser, isn't it? So P2 comes at first. Isn't it? Right. Then after that, the next one is nothing but glucose with osmotic pressure P1, so medium. It has medium osmotic pressure, isn't it? Then the one which has higher molar mass is nothing but sucrose. Osmotic pressure is given as P3, greater molar mass, so it has lesser osmotic pressure. Okay, but decreasing order of osmotic pressure is P2 greater than P1, which in turn greater than P3. P2, P1, P1, P3. Okay, so option 1 is the correct one. P2, P1, P3. P2, P1, P2, P3. P2 greater than P1, that is osmotic pressure of urea is greater compared with osmotic pressure of glucose, which in turn greater than osmotic pressure of sucrose, which has higher molecular mass. Okay, right. Next question number 61. So let us come over here. Okay. What is the major product obtained in the following reaction? Okay. So now this is a reaction between an alkene and hydrogen halide in presence of a peroxide, benzyl peroxide. A peroxide is nothing but benzyl peroxide. Okay, right. Reaction between alkene and HBr in absence of peroxide is Markovnikov reaction. But here we do the reaction in presence of peroxide, so it is nothing but anti-Markovnikov reaction. It is nothing but what? Anti-Markovnikov's reaction. Okay, right. According to anti-Markovnikov reaction, when hydrogen halide is added to alkene, the halogen prefers to add with carbon having more number of hydrogen, and hydrogen is preferring to add with carbon having lesser number of hydrogen. Now, so look at this C double bond C. This carbon is having more hydrogen, this has less hydrogen. So according to anti-Markovnikov rule, halogen goes and added to carbon with more hydrogen. Halogen is getting added to terminal carbon and hydrogen is added to the next carbon, isn't it? But now it will become as CH2, then it will become CH2Br. So CH2Br. Okay, so option A is the correct answer, or option 1 is the correct one. Okay, so this is the product what you get when this 3-methyl but1-ene. Actually the name of this compound is 3-methyl but1-ene. When it reacts with hydrogen bromide in presence of benzyl peroxide, it follows anti-Markovnikov reaction and Br is added to the terminal carbon here and hydrogen is added to the next carbon, so that the product formed is nothing but this one. Okay, right. So option 1 is the right answer. The name of the product is nothing but 1, 2, 3, 4, isn't it? Bromomethylbutane, probably 1 bromo. What is it? 1 bromo, methyl group at third carbon. So 3-methyl, 1 bromo, 3-methyl butane. That will be the IUPAC name of the product what we get. Okay, so this is the correct answer. So option 1 is the right answer. Okay, right. So now we go for question number 62. You are given two statements. Statement 1, aspirin and paracetamol are narcotic analgesics. Okay, right. Then second statement, morphine and heroin are non-narcotic analgesic. So now first of all you want to know what is mean by narcotic and non-narcotic analgesic. Okay, narcotic analgesics both are used for reducing pain. They are used for painkillers. But narcotic analgesic reduces pain without affecting the consciousness. It reduces the pain, but it does not affect the consciousness. It reduces pain with loss of consciousness. So narcotic drugs or narcotic analgesic reducing the pain along with loss of consciousness. Non-narcotic also reduces pain. This also reduces pain, but it does not without affecting the consciousness. First of all, you should know what is mean by narcotic with loss of consciousness, non-narcotic without the loss of consciousness. Both are reducing pains, isn't it? Right. Now here it is given aspirin and paracetamol. Aspirin and paracetamol are narcotic analgesics, isn't it? Which means these two are causing loss of consciousness, isn't it? But actually aspirin, paracetamol, they does not affect the consciousness. Okay, so they are non-narcotic. Actually they are non-narcotic analgesic. So statement 1 is wrong, isn't it? Similarly, morphine and heroin are given as non-narcotic, which means they are not affecting the consciousness, simply they are reducing the pain. But actually morphine and heroin are narcotic analgesics. They too are narcotic. They reduce pain along with loss of consciousness. So both the statements are wrong. Both the statements are false. So the correct answer is option 2. Both statement 1 and statement 2 are false. Okay, right. So now we go for question number 63. Question number 63. Right. So correct sequence of bond enthalpy. Correct sequence of bond enthalpy of carbon halogen bond. Okay, right. Carbon halogen bond. Okay, so the correct answer is option 2 is the correct one. CH3F bond is much stronger, so it has greater bond enthalpy than CH3Cl, which in turn greater than CH3Br, then CH3I. Fluorine bond is, carbon fluorine bond is much stronger. Carbon, because of smaller the size, that fluorine atom can be strongly held by methyl carbon, so that it is difficult to break CF bond, so that it need more energy. So bond enthalpy of CF bond is comparatively high. Then next to that CS3Cl, then after that CS3Br, then CS3I. We can see that so these are halogens. Going down the group, the size of halogen is increasing, isn't it? Greater the size of halogen, lesser will be the stability. Lesser the stability, lesser the bond enthalpy. Lesser the stability means lesser the bond enthalpy. Okay, so which is less stable among this iodide compound? Iodide compound is having least bond enthalpy. Which has more stability is nothing but fluoride compound, which has greater bond enthalpy. So the correct order: fluoride, chloride, bromide, iodide. Okay, correct decreasing order. So option 2 is the correct one. Okay, right. So I have given size. This is size order. Size from fluorine to iodine gradually increases. When the size increases, the stability decreases, because greater the size of atom is difficult to hold strongly, isn't it? Right. So I have given even the bond enthalpy value also. Okay, the bond enthalpy of CS3F is about 452, chloride compound 351, for bromide 393, then iodide is 234. You can see there is a gradual decrease in bond enthalpy. Okay, from fluorine to iodine. Okay, so the option 2 is the right answer. Okay, so here the correct answer is option 2. Right. Now question number 64. BF3 molecule is a planar. BF3 has a trigonal planar shape, isn't it? Right. And it is an electron deficient compound. We know very well, because that boron atom is not surrounded by 8 electrons. It is lacking electrons, so that it is an electron deficient compound. Electron deficient compound. And now the question is, what is the nature of hybridization? What is the nature of hybridization in BF3, as well as what is the total number of electrons present around the central atom boron? Okay, right. Now this is the shape of boron trifluoride. Trigonal planar shape, isn't it? Boron at the center of a trigonal plane, and the 3 corners are occupied by fluorine. Actually this BF3 is formed by sp2 hybridization. Actually boron atom undergoes a hybridization sp2. As a result of sp2 hybridization, this boron atom will form 3 sp2 hybridized orbital. These are nothing but sp2 hybridized orbitals of boron atom. Okay, right. Now the 3 sp2 hybridized orbitals of boron atom undergoes linear overlapping with pz orbital of 3 fluorine atom, and such a way they form 3 boron fluorine sigma bonds. Okay, so that the nature of hybridization in boron trifluoride is nothing but sp2, and number of electrons around central atom. So this is a central atom boron. This boron is surrounded by 4 bond pairs, isn't it? This one, this is the second one, this one, this is 2, this is the third bond pair. Total number of electron around the central atom is about 6. Hybridization is sp2. Number of electron around boron is about 6. So the right answer is option 3, sp2 and 6. Option 3 is the right answer. Hybridization is sp2 in BF3, and the number of electron around boron is 6, because boron surrounded by 3 bonds. There are 3 bond pairs, together 6 electrons. Okay, right. Now question number 64 is completed. Now question number 65. Right. Which among the following is a correct option for the relation between Cp and Cv? Cp and Cv are nothing but heat capacities. What is it? Heat capacity. Cp is nothing but heat capacity at constant pressure. Cv is nothing but heat capacity at constant volume for an ideal gas. Okay, right. Now the relation between Cp and Cv for an ideal gas is this one: Cp minus Cv equal to Nr. Here N is nothing but number of moles, isn't it? But here the question is, what is the relation between Cp and Cv for 1 mole of ideal gas? 1 mole of ideal gas. So exact relation Cp minus Cv equal to Nr. You are given N is equal to 1. But in the place of N, you are supposed to substitute 1. But therefore, the relation between Cp and Cv is nothing but Cp minus Cv equal to R. Cp minus Cv equal to R. So the correct answer is option 2. Cp minus Cv equal to R. Okay. So this is the right answer. Okay, so this is come based on thermodynamics lesson. Okay, right. Now question number 66. Among the alkaline earth metal halides, you are given some alkaline earth metal halides. Among the given four, one is covalent in nature, as well as being a covalent one, it readily dissolves in organic solvent. Readily dissolves in organic solvent. The halides given are calcium chloride, strontium chloride, magnesium chloride, and beryllium chloride. Okay. Actually, these are group elements. So this is what actually the group: beryllium first, followed by magnesium, then calcium, then after that you have strontium, isn't it? Right. Now going down the group, the size of the atom increases, isn't it? Beryllium smaller than magnesium, calcium, strontium larger one, isn't it? Right. Now, whereas magnesium, calcium, strontium chlorides are ionic in nature. So magnesium, calcium, strontium chlorides are ionic in nature, whereas beryllium chloride is a covalent compound. Beryllium chloride is a chloride compound of beryllium is covalent in nature. That is because of the reason smaller size of Be2 plus ion, as well as high polarizing power. Okay, so because of these two reasons, that is smaller size and high polarizing power of Be2 plus ion. Be2 plus ion or beryllium, and it forms only covalent halides. So that beryllium chloride it is a covalent compound. Okay, being a covalent compound, it readily dissolves in organic solvents. Okay, so the correct answer is option 4, beryllium chloride. Option 4, beryllium chloride is the right answer. Okay, right. I will write here. So option 4, Be, beryllium chloride is the correct answer. Okay, right. So now we go for the next question. Question number 67. An organic compound contains carbon about 78%, and the remaining is hydrogen. Remaining 22% is hydrogen. Okay, right. So what will be the empirical formula of the organic compound? And you are given atomic weight of carbon 12, hydrogen is about 1, and you know that this can be answered based on empirical formula calculation. Okay, right. So you know that the tabular column format we use, isn't it? Carbon element 78%, hydrogen element 22%, isn't it? So that first we have to find out relative number of moles. So that percentage of element has to be divided by atomic number of the element. So 78 by 12, so 6.5. Similarly, percentage of hydrogen 22 by its atomic mass 1, so 22. Okay, then simple ratio moles. So these two numbers has to be divided by the smallest one among them. Smallest one is 6.5. For 6.5 by the same 1, then 22 divided by 6.5. So nearly you are getting about 3, isn't it? So now the simplest whole number ratio 1 for carbon, 3 for hydrogen. Therefore the empirical formula C about 1 time, H about 3 times, isn't it? It's nothing but CSV. So the right answer is option 3. Option 3 is the right answer. The empirical formula of organic compound having carbon 78%, hydrogen 22% is CSV. Okay, right. So now question number 68. What is the major product formed by the dehydrohalogenation of 2-bromopentane? 2-bromopentane undergoes dehydrohalogenation. Removal of hydrogen and halogen occurs in 2-bromopentane. The major product formed is pentene, pent2ene. Okay, right. Now the question is, this reaction follows which of the following rule? Okay, Say's-F rule, Hund's rule, Hoffman rule, or Huckel's rule. Okay, right. Hund's rule is about atomic structure. Okay, arrangement of electrons, pairing of electrons. Huckel's rule is coming under aromaticity, isn't it? So it may be either Say's-F rule or Hoffman rule, isn't it? Right. So now, here I have written the compound 2-bromopentane. Okay, so the numbering can be given this way. Bromine at second carbon is an alkane single bonded compound with 5 carbon, so 2-bromopentane, isn't it? Right. Now when it undergoes dehydrohalogenation, probably it may lose hydrogen and halogen. There are two possibilities. This halogen can be removed with this hydrogen, which results in formation of this compound 2-pentene, isn't it? Or this halogen, this is one possibility, isn't it? Or this halogen can be removed along with this hydrogen, left side hydrogen, so which may result in formation of this compound 1-pentene. But here there are two possibilities. If halogen combines with the left side hydrogen, one pentene is formed as product, or the halogen combines with right side hydrogen, this left side hydrogen, this right side hydrogen, the product formed is 2-pentene, isn't it? Right. Now it is given in the question that 2-pentene is formed as a major product. So this is formed as major product. In the sense, this reaction follows Sage-F rule. This reaction follows Sage-F rule, because what is Sage-F rule now? So when an alkene is formed in a reaction by dehydrohalogenation, the alkene which has more number of substitution, is formed as a major product. Okay, right. Now look at this. It is given 2-pentene is formed as major product, isn't it? Now 2-pentene has two substituents. So there are two alkyl substituents, left side methyl group and right side ethyl group, isn't it? Right. So it has two alkyl substituents. But look at 1-pentene. So 1-pentene it has only one substituent. It has only N-propyl group as a substituent. This has one alkyl substituent. Okay. But now which is formed as major product? The one which has two substituents, isn't it? Which means this reaction follows Sage-F rule. Okay, right. So this is the right answer, Sage-F rule. Right. Next to question number 69. So what is the IUPAC name of the organic compound which is formed in the following reaction? Okay, the reaction is the first acetone reacts with the Grignard region, ethyl magnesium bromide in presence of dry ether gives a compound A, for example. Then that compound A on hydrolysis, second condition, in presence of acid catalyst giving another compound B, that is B is the final product. Now what is the IUPAC name of the product B? That is a question. Okay, right. Now this was the reaction actually. So this is nothing but acetone, ketone with 3 carbon atoms, CH3, C double bond O, CH3. First it reacts with Grignard region, ethyl magnesium bromide. You know that being a carbonyl compound, the addition reaction takes place in carbonyl group, isn't it? This ethyl group is getting added with carbon atom, then MgBr is getting added with oxygen. Okay, so first you get a addition compound like this. Okay, ethyl group get added with carbon and MgBr is getting added with oxygen. So first you are getting this addition product. Next step, this addition product is subjected to acid hydrolysis. Now the OMg bond gets broken, H gets added to oxygen, O gets to MgBr. Probably this becomes a byproduct, hydroxy magnesium bromide. Hydroxy magnesium bromide is the byproduct, isn't it? Now the main product is this one, H is added to OH, but that results in formation of alcohol, this alcohol. Right, so the name of this alcohol, this is the longest carbon chain with 4 carbon, butane, OH group, butanol at second, OH at second carbon, butane, 2-ol. At the same carbon there is a methyl group also, but 2-methyl, butane, 2-ol. That is the IUPAC name of product what we get in this reaction. Okay, 2-methyl, butane, 2-ol. So look at this, 2-methyl, butane, 2-ol is the right answer. Option 4 is the correct one. Okay, right. Next question number 70. Noble gases are named because of their inertness towards reactivity. Right. Identify an incorrect statement regarding inert gases. So among the given 4 statements, one is incorrect about noble gases. You have to identify that one. Noble gases are sparingly soluble in water. That is the correct one. Then noble gases are having high melting point and boiling point. That's what the incorrect statement. Noble gases are having, they are not having high melting and boiling point, so it is an incorrect one. They have weak dispersion force is correct, as well as noble gases are having large positive value of electron gain enthalpy. This is also a correct statement. Okay, so because adding electron to noble gas are highly difficult because of their stable electronic configuration, so that they need energy when they accept electron, which means they have positive electron gain enthalpy. So that the incorrect statement regarding noble gases is they are having very high melting and boiling point, but actually they have low melting point and boiling point. Okay, right. Now we can go to question number 71. Question number 71. Right. So here you are given 2 data, pKb. What is it? pKb value of F base, dimethylamine. So this is nothing but the formula of dimethylamine, CH3 twice NH, okay, which is a weak base actually. This is a weak base. Its pKb value is given 3.27. Okay. Then another substance, pKa of acetic acid. So acetic acid, this is a weak acid. You are given pKa value of a weak acid. Okay, it's about 4.77 respectively at T Kelvin at same temperature. Okay, right. Now what will be the pH of dimethyl ammonium sulfate? Okay, now when these two reacts, probably they may form a salt. So because one is being weak acid, another one being weak base, when they react they may give a acid base will give a salt. The salt formed is nothing but dimethyl ammonium sulfate. Okay, now what will be the pH of this salt formed? What will be the pH of salt formed? Okay, right. Actually this is based on salt hydrolysis topic. Here you are given weak base and weak acid, isn't it? Weak acid, acetic acid, weak base on the dimethyl amine. Okay, right. So the formula for calculating pH of weak acid versus weak base is nothing but pH equal to 7 plus half into pKa minus pKb. So pKa, pKb values are given. When you substitute, you will get the answer. Okay. So that 7 plus half into pKa value 4.77. pKb of dimethylamine is about 3.27. Okay. Do the subtraction. You are getting about 1.50. About half into 1.50, 0.75. 7. So the final answer pH is nothing but 7.75. Okay, so this is a formula substitution problem. I think you can easily do it. Okay, so that the answer option 3 is the correct answer. Option 3 is the correct one. The pH of dimethyl ammonium acetate salt is 7.75. Okay, right. Now question number 72. The right option for the statement Tyndall effect is exhibited by. So you are given some solutions. Among that 4 solutions, only one solution exhibits Tyndall effect. So which one is exhibiting Tyndall effect? Okay, right. So now the options are sodium chloride solution. Sodium chloride is a true solution. Sodium chloride readily dissolves in water. It forms a true solution. Glucose also forms true solution. Urea also true solution. Starch forms a colloidal solution. Okay. By among these 4 solutions, only starch forms colloidal solution. The other 3 are forming true solutions, whereas Tyndall effect is nothing but a property of colloidal solution. Tyndall effect is nothing but a property of colloidal solution. It's nothing but Tyndall effect is nothing but scattering of light by colloidal particles. Scattering of light by colloidal particles is what we call as Tyndall effect. So that the Tyndall effect is exhibited by starch solution. Okay, because being a colloidal solution, it has Tyndall effect. Other 3 are true solution. They do not exhibit Tyndall effect. Okay, so the right answer is option 3, starch solution. Okay, so starch solution is a colloidal solution. This is the correct answer. Okay, right. Question number 73. Question number 73. You are given 2 statements, isn't it? So first statement, you are given the increasing acidic strength of hydrogen halides. The acidic character of hydrogen halides increases from hydrogen fluoride to hydrogen iodide, which means hydrogen iodide is most acidic, hydrogen fluoride is least acidic. Okay, so that's the correct one. This is a correct order. Okay, right. Because hydrogen fluoride, because of intermolecular hydrogen bonding, it cannot liberate H plus ion more readily. So it is the weak acidic substance, weak acid. Whereas hydrogen iodide, being larger in size of the I minus, that H plus ion can be readily liberated. Okay, so statement 1 is the correct one. This is a correct statement. Okay, right. Statement 2, as the size of halogen increases down the group, the bond strength of hydrogen halide decreases. When the bond strength decreases, the H plus ion formation is becoming more easier. The bond between halogen and hydrogen can be easily broken if the strength is less. In the sense, if the bond is broken easily, the H plus ion is readily produced. Okay, so among this, hydrogen iodide is having weaker bond strength, so that bond is broken more readily compared with other hydrogen halide, which means Hi readily gives H plus ion, so it is found to be more acidic. HF is weak acidic. Okay, so right now, so that because of decrease of bond strength, the acidic character increases down the group, isn't it? So that both statements are true. Statement 1, statement 2, both are true. So answer is option 1. Option 1. Option 1, both statement 1 and statement 2 are true. Okay, right. Next, last question, question number 74 in this part. Ethylene diamine tetraacetate, EDTA. EDTA is an important Licon, electron donor species. It's nothing but ethylene diamine tetraacetate. Okay, right. So now, what is the nature of EDTA? Okay, you are given some statement regarding EDTA. Which one is correct about EDTA? Okay, so I have drawn the structure of EDTA. This is ethylene diamine actually. So NH2, single bond CH2, single bond CH2, single bond NH2 is nothing but what? Ethylene diamine. Now these two amino hydrogens are getting substituted by acetate portion. So 4 acetate portion. In ethylene diamine molecule there are 4 acetate groups. That's why ethylene diamine tetraacetate. Ethylene diamine tetraacetate. Okay, right. Now this acts as a ligand. Ligand in the sense electron donor, Lewis base otherwise. It acts as a electron donor, Lewis base. And it has 6 donor atoms. It has 6 donor atoms. See, both nitrogens are having a lone pair of electron. So that these two nitrogens can make bond with the central metal atom, as well as you can see there are 4 O minus, isn't it? 4 oxygen atom also electron rich. Even these 4 oxygen also can make bond with the central metal atom, isn't it? So that this molecule EDTA is capable of making how many bonds totally? 6 bonds. Each molecule, single molecule of EDTA can make 6 bonds, isn't it? Right. And the 6 bonds are formed by 2 bonds are formed by nitrogen atom, and the remaining 4 bonds are formed by oxygen atom. Okay, right. Now look at option 1. It is a hexadentate Licon. EDTA is a hexa. It is capable of forming how many bonds? 6 bonds. But the one which forms 6 bonds is called as hexadentate. Hexadentate Licon. That is the right one. Among the hexadentate, and it has 6 donor atoms, isn't it? Among the 6 donor atoms, 4 are oxygen atoms and 2 are nitrogen donor atoms. So option 1 is the right answer for question number 74. Okay, right. Thank you. I hope you are able to follow the solution for these NEET questions. This is part 1. The remaining questions will be discussed in part 2 video. So keep watching that also. Thank you very much.